Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We'll just give it another minute or so while people join in via Zoom and via LinkedIn Live. Looking forward to a fun and exciting discussion today. Okay, I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where in the world you are today. Welcome to this webinar today. We are talking all things the UK immigration shakeup, hurdles, challenges, solutions, and more importantly, what's next for employers. My name is Naran Zaroug. I am Enterprise Partnerships Lead with Localize. I'm speaking to you from London, and I'll be hosting our webinar today. For anyone that's not familiar with Localize, Localize is an immigration technology and global mobility platform. We support both organizations and their talent to seamlessly cross borders, but most importantly, compliantly as well. For anyone that wants a little bit more information about who we are, what we do, or a sneak peek of our technology, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be very happy to have a chat with you all later or potentially after the webinar. So to the very important task at hand, today's topic, it's the UK immigration shakeup. For anyone that's close to the space and mobility or immigration, lots has been going on in the UK sector around the immigration piece. Probably, I'd say over the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of changes, increases in salary thresholds, increases in fees. We've heard about audits. We've heard about sponsorship revocations as well, and this new exciting entry system called the ETA. But more on that later. So with change and challenge, opportunity arises is how we like to look at it. So today we're going to kind of deep dive into this topic. We're going to speak to some experts within the space, discuss some of the challenges, the pitfalls, and really learn about kind of what are the best hiring strategies long term. Thankfully, I have a group of expert panelists that are going to help me with these conversations and hopefully give us some tips, insights on best practice and what we can do going forward. We will wrap up the webinar with a live Q&A. So questions, queries, issues, anecdotes, stories, please put them into the chat function. We're very used to horror stories in the immigration space. We hear lots of them. So bring them and we'd love to hear more and hear your perspectives and insights. But before we get to that, it gives me great honor to be able to introduce Aaron Walton from the UK Home Office. I know Aaron's been quite busy traveling the country, talking all things ETA to the nation, keeping us informed and keeping us compliant about what it is, why it's important, and what it's going to do for us. But before we get into that, Aaron, just tell us a little bit about your role within the UK Home Office, and thank you for being here.
You're very welcome, Naran, and thanks everybody for having me. So, as said, my name's Aaron Walton. I work in the Future Border and Immigration Systems program within the Home Office. A lot of words, but essentially, it is the team that is responsible for the delivery of both ETAs and e-visas. My role specifically, I lead on ETA engagement. So, as Naran said, my role is to make sure that external stakeholders like yourselves are aware that traveling to the UK is now changing and what requirements are needed to ensure that people can comply with this new travel requirement.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. And probably a lot of educational work to do
Mhm.
across lots of different disciplines, no doubt. I know you've prepared a presentation, just kind of give us a little bit more detail. I know a lot of you are familiar with ETA, but I'm sure as questions arise, just put them into the box, and then we'll be able to have a more detailed panel discussion with Aaron after that. So we're just going to see if we can get your slides up.
Mhm.
Fantastic. It's
Cool.
like magic. So yeah, I'll pass over to you, Aaron, and you can talk us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora, and thanks everybody. So this is just an introduction to the electronic travel authorizations, which I'll call ETA from now on. Next slide, please. So the idea of ETAs kind of falls into this idea of a permission to travel, which essentially means that everybody traveling to the UK will need some sort of permission before they arrive. This idea of a universal permission to travel isn't new. It's something that's been in train for quite some time. However, the addition of the ETA kind of extends this out. So what I mean it's been in train for quite some time is that, as you can see, there are sort of three sort of categories of people. So you've got British and Irish citizens. Nothing is changing in regards to the introduction of ETA. Their passport, their valid passport, sorry, is their evidence of their permission when they're traveling outside the common travel area. Again, the introduction of ETA, there is no change. There's also no change for those who've been granted permission to enter or remain in the UK. So if you think of residents, so indefinite leave to remain, long-term, leave to remain, indefinite leave to remain, and those with sort of EU settlement status. Anybody that had an old biometric residence permit before now have an e-visa. Again, the only change is that move to digital. But in terms of the introduction of ETA, there is no change in terms of how these people will continue to enter the country. Everything remains the same. Where the change will happen is for those nationals who ordinarily do not require a visa to enter the UK and also do not have an immigration status. So this is very much aimed at the visitor. So if you think the American visitor, Americans do not need a visa to enter the UK, and also that visitor does not have any status. That is who the ETA is for, and that's where the main change will be. And just to add that the ETA itself is required to get on the plane, the train, or the boat to come to the UK. So it's the thing that's needed before you arrive in the UK. Once you arrive at the UK, you'll go through the same border process as you do now. So if you go through an e-gate, you'll continue to do so. The introduction of the ETA has no impact on e-gate policy as it stands. But also, if you need to go through an immigration officer, you'll continue to do that. So again, the ETA doesn't change immigration processes. It's just an additional thing that is being asked of these nationals. Next slide, please. So what exactly is an ETA? So as I said, it's a permission to travel or transit landside through the UK. So we're making that very special distinction. We say that because if I'd been speaking to you maybe 3, 4 months ago, it would have included the whole of the traffic, both landside and airside. So the difference between landside and airside, you may know, but I just think it's very useful to just explain. Landside is when somebody needs to go through border control to collect their luggage to per se check onto another flight. Airside is when you don't need to do that, where you stay in departures and you get your connecting flight, knowing that your baggage is going through to your final destination. There are actually only two airports within the UK that you can travel airside, which is Heathrow and Manchester. So if you are traveling airside via Heathrow or Manchester, you do not need an ETA. But if you are traveling landside, so going through border control, you will need an ETA. So as I said, this is very much aimed at visitors who do not currently need a visa to, do not need a visa to come to the UK and do not have a UK immigration status prior to traveling. It's valid for 2 years until the expiry date of the passport, whichever comes sooner, and it is valid for multiple trips during that period. One question we always get asked is, well, does that mean I can stay for 2 years as a visitor? The answer is no. You still need to comply with the immigration rules. Border Force officers will be looking to make sure that people aren't staying in the UK through frequent and successive visits. So you still need to comply as you should do. The application process is light touch, it's online. You can use an app and you can also go on gov.uk. I'll explain the application process in a moment. There was a mention about fees earlier, everybody's favorite topic. So back in January, I believe it was January, the UK government looked at a whole suite of fees and decided to review and for most increase the charge of the fee. That goes for the same with ETA. It was originally £10, but since the 9th of April, it's now £16 per person. It's a digital permission to travel. It's linked to your passport. You don't necessarily need a paper copy to evidence that you've got it because it is linked to your passport. But once it's linked, that's your permission to travel. The reason we're introducing this is quite simple, really. It's to strengthen the security of the UK border. We just want to know more about people before they arrive. We believe that the ETA application fills the current gap that we have in people arriving in the UK and just make sure we know more about them before they arrive. Next slide, please. The other thing also to add is that we are not the only ones that are doing this. Most people will be familiar with US ESTA, but Australia, Canada, and New Zealand also have their own ETA schemes as well. People may be also aware that the EU is looking to launch their ETIAS scheme. At the moment, we're not quite sure what date that's going to be. We think it may be next year, but we only know little bits and things we may see in the press. But due to our sort of further engagement with other countries, we are learning that places like Japan, Israel, Thailand, and South Africa are also thinking about introducing their ETAs as well. So again, this feels very much in the direction of travel that a lot of countries are taking to border security. And this is very much something that the UK feels it should be a part of as well. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about who does and who does not require an ETA. So even though some of this is repetition, I do think it's just useful to kind of hammer home the points. So as I mentioned before, it's for those who are visiting or transiting landside who currently do not need a visa for short stays. And I will say that I keep on referring to these countries that do not require a visa. In a couple of slides, there is a list of all these countries that it applies to, so it should make sense. So when we say things like visiting, that's tourism, visiting friends and family, business trips, attending events, studying as a visitor, anything you would expect somebody as a visitor to come and do in the UK. It does apply to everybody of all ages. So regardless of age, everybody will need an ETA. This is very much how the UK applies this approach to visa products. So we're just replicating that approach with the ETA as well. Many people who come over for the creative work concession or even prepaid engagement, that sits within the visitor rules. So again, those individuals who are within the eligible nationality will need an ETA to come to the UK. So again, a little bit more repetition, but those visiting the UK who currently require a visa do not need an ETA. The visa regime is remaining exactly the same. So for instance, Nigerian nationals require a visa to come to the UK. There is no expectation for them to get a visa in addition to to get an ETA in addition to the visa that they've got, because the visa acts as their permission to travel. The same with those who've got permission to live, work, or study in the UK. So if you've got EU settlement status, again, there is no requirement to get an ETA. If you've got a British or Irish passport, no ETA needed. And while I'm talking about that, that brings me to dual British or Irish citizens. So as a British national, you do not need an ETA, but we understand that, of course, many people hold dual nationality. If you're traveling in and out of the States, we know that it's a requirement that you travel in and out with your American passport, for instance, which is fine. What we would advise dual nationals to do is to carry both passports. So when they are leaving the States and they are being asked to evidence their ETA, they can then produce their British passport to show that they do not require an ETA due to their nationality. If you don't have a British passport, there is something you can apply for, which is called the Certificate of Entitlement of Right of Abode. The government likes a lot of words, but essentially it's a sticker that you put into your other passport. So in this example, your American passport, to evidence your British nationality. I would advise though that the certificate of application is about £400 or £500, I think. So it's probably best if you can get a British passport. It's a lot cheaper in the long run. That would just be my own personal advice. There's also an exemption for those who are legally resident in Ireland who do not require a visa for travel. So if you've got an American national who's resident in Ireland, as long as they are traveling within the common travel area, they will not need an ETA to travel from per se Dublin into London. However, that changes if they are traveling from outside the common travel area. Those who are exempt from immigration control, so if you think diplomats, serving government ministers, heads of state, they're exempt from immigration control, so therefore exempt from the ETA requirement. Those who hold British overseas territory citizens don't require an ETA. Those who have British national overseas passports and the accompanying visa also don't require an ETA as well. And as I mentioned earlier, those who are transiting airside, again, not having to go through immigration control, will not require an ETA. Next slide, please. So I'll talk more about the passenger process. So the way to apply for an ETA is digital, so there is no paper-based application process. There are two ways to apply for an ETA. So you've got the ETA app, and then you've also got gov.uk. You can use both to help a third party apply for an application, because the other thing also to make it clear is that at the moment the application process is only available in English. So if you're helping somebody whose English isn't their strongest language, or they don't use technology, sorry, you can help them with the application. It differs slightly depending on which method you use. If you use the app, that person has to be in the room with you when you're completing the application, because the app asks for a live picture of the applicant there and then. However, with gov.uk, you can have that person thousands of miles away. As long as they can send you a picture of their biodata page and also a picture of themselves, you can then upload it. But with any immigration product, it is the responsibility of the applicant to make sure that the information put on the application is correct. Also, as I mentioned, children will need their own ETA, so parents and guardians can also apply on their behalf. In terms of the application process, it is quick and light touch. It's been designed to take less than 10 minutes to complete. If you're using the app, a lot of the important information is collected automatically by scanning sort of the passport biodata page. So there's less chance for people to make mistakes. There also are a short set of biographic and biometric questions, and you need to answer some suitability questions. So those suitability questions sort of rely on criminality. It asks you if you have a job, but not having a job does not preclude you from an ETA. It's just a question that gets asked. It will also ask some counterterrorism screening questions, as well as you'd expect with a product like this. We would advise that people apply for the ETA at least 3 working days in advance. So I say that as a caveat because most people are actually getting their responses within an hour of actually applying for the app, for the application, sorry. However, if there is an issue with your application, say you check something or something's flagged up on the system, it then gets sent to a caseworker, and that caseworker has 3 days to turn your application around. So even though a high percentage of people, when I say high percentage, we're talking more than sort of 90 to 95% of people are getting automated grants, we still insist that people apply as soon as they know they're traveling to the UK, just so that they can avoid any sort of mad dash before getting their application. Once you've submitted your application, though, everybody goes through the same sort of automatic security check. If there are no issues, you will then get what we call an automated grant. It might come within sort of a couple of seconds. It might take half an hour. You will get an email that will confirm that your ETA has been approved, and then you are clear to sort of fly to the UK. Again, you don't have to print off anything, but if you're one of those people like myself who likes to print off things, you're more than welcome to do so. But I'm just here to sort of assure you that it will be linked to your passport. The other thing also to mention is you can be refused an ETA, and there is no right of appeal if you are refused. So if you are refused, you will get a confirmation email very similar to the acceptance one. It will state you've been refused. It will give a reason. It won't go into depth. It may just say you have been refused due to we are aware that you have been denied entry as a visitor before. It won't go into much detail beyond that. On the email, it would then guide that person to apply for a visit visa. So if I go back to what I said on the first slide about some nationals ordinarily do not require a visa. So an American does not require a visa to come to the UK. However, it doesn't mean they can't apply for one. That's always been an option that's available to Americans should they wish to choose it. And some Americans may use it if they know that they've got a sort of checkered immigration history, and therefore that visa acts as a bit of protection that if they've got that, then somebody's sort of assessed their immigration history and made that decision. It also goes back to this idea that everybody's going to need some sort of permission to travel. So if that American unfortunately cannot get an ETA, it doesn't mean they can circumvent the system and just still try and fly to the UK. They're going to need some sort of product, some sort of permission to come to the UK. The other thing I also want to stress about the application process is that, as I mentioned, the ETA is £16 per person, but we are aware that there are many sites that are very much affiliated with airlines that people can use to apply for an ETA. These third-party websites, they are legitimate. We have seen that many people are getting the ETAs that they have applied for. However, they are being charged admin fees, and we know stories of people being charged £100 for what is a £16 ETA. So even though those sites are available to people, we would strongly suggest that people use the gov.uk webpage. I can provide that information. I think I've shared it with Noran already, so she can send it out after the fact. But it'd be very best if you can guide people to the website to make sure that they're paying the right price for their ETA. Otherwise, they could end up paying, £100 for an ETA, and nobody really wants that. Next slide, please. So all the countries that you see here are all the countries that will be impacted by the introduction of ETA. So these are what we in the government will call non-visa national countries. There's about 90 of them. And they sort of span sort of the GCC, the Africas, Americas, Oceania, and the EU. Many of you, I'm hoping, may be aware that we did our rollout in phases. We started with the Gulf Cooperation countries in 2023, which feels like ages ago now. We started with Qatar, and then we rolled out to the rest of them in February 24. The second phase was January 25 when we rolled out to all those countries in the middle, so US, Canada, lots of countries in Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and then we recently rolled out to the EU on the 2nd of April. So we've now completed the actual rollout of the ETA scheme, essentially. In terms of the next steps, we're looking towards enforcement. ETAs aren't strictly enforced at this time. What that essentially means is that if you don't have an ETA, it won't necessarily preclude you from getting on the flight or the boat or the Eurostar at this time. However, we strongly want people to engage in the process because at some point we will enforce it. And we just want people to use this time to engage with the process. But also from our perspective, things are being brought to our attention quite a lot in terms of things we didn't foresee. So this period allows us to kind of understand what is kind of on the horizon, what problems are going to come up, and use this time to address those issues now. Next slide, please. So this is sort of my penultimate slide, I believe. So we know that this is a big change, and we foresee that this is going to impact about 30 million people. So our engagement team has done a lot. There's only 3 of us, and we can only do so much. We've done a lot of engagement in this space, and the big ask is to make sure that people are informing their staff, their stakeholders, their customers, especially if you're bringing people to the UK, that traveling to the UK is changing. We've been working very close with the carriers. They've been our real partners in this to make sure that they are communicating this out because they essentially will be the enforcers of this. We don't expect you to do this alone. One of the things we do have is a partner pack, which again I've shared with Noran and I'm happy to share in this as well. It contains a lot of the information I've given you today about ETAs. Feel free to share it with anybody who's interested, and that goes from stakeholders to friends and family to your next door neighbor. Because even though people may not think, oh, well, I'm British, it doesn't really matter, we all have friends that live abroad that may come to visit us. They're going to need to know that this change is coming as well. As much as the organizations you also represent, they will also want to know that this is changing as well. So I will stop there. The last thing I would just will say is, I know we've got time for Q&A and such, but if you don't get a chance to ask any questions or something comes to you after the fact, there is an email address there, which is etaengagement@homeoffice.gov.uk. Please feel free to use it and get in contact with the team with any questions you may have. So I will pause there because I think my next slide is just a thank you slide, I believe. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much, Aaron. Really, really insightful. And actually, it's interesting that you highlighted the landslide versus airside, because that was actually going to be one of my questions.
Mm,
So it was great that you highlighted that. Thank you. And
you're
also
welcome.
about the appeal process as well. I think
Mm,
that was useful to know. I have lots more ETA questions, but before we do that, I'm going to bring in the rest of my expert panelists. We have Nina Vafi from RWE and Hamza Hussein, a fellow Localize colleague of mine. Firstly, over to you, Nina, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into immigration and your role at RWE.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me. Well, immigration wasn't my dream when I studied, so I came in by accident. I think a lot of people in our area came in by accident. So my background was humanitarian law, and I was doing a PhD about child soldiers. And then I got recruited as a young associate and started my career as a lawyer, then moved in-house, and now I'm leading the immigration program at RWE, helping them with compliance and overseeing our population globally.
That's great. Yeah, everyone kind of falls into it. There's always some complex trajectory that we've all ended up into this wonderful world. And Hamza, over to you, our local guru.
Thank you very much, Nuran. Um, and yes, just diving off of Nina as well, I think immigration and global mobility itself is always a very interesting industry. My introduction is I'm actually the UK and Irish immigration case manager at Localize. So my main job role is to support companies and our clients to navigate the complexities of UK immigration and assist them in making the global mobility aspect smoother and more compliant. Um, I have been in immigration for the last, I'd say close to 7 years, and I actually came into immigration as one of my first main career roles straight after my law degree. So for me, my passion actually stems from whilst I was studying, I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be an immigration expert. And hey, as we grow, digitalization is possibly the hot topic at the moment. I'm glad to be working in a tech company, and bringing immigration and tech together. So it's good to see the way that it's evolved rather than me sitting here and just writing paper applications. We actually have a system in place.
Thanks, Hamza. Yeah, the digitization will definitely come to that, but that part of the future for this sector for sure. Nina, I'm going to start with you. We've had some great detail from Aaron around ETA, how crucial it is, the fact that it's being rolled out in stages. I know for your perspective, you hold this global role within immigration. How have you had to kind of tackle this from a internal comms perspective? Because I feel like there's always some constant comms that needs to go on to keep your employees compliant. Is that something you've had to kind of take charge of?
Yeah, and as always, when there is an announcement, a change,
Yeah.
panic within the organization, because obviously people don't understand immigration. They don't know what it means. Can I just enter the UK now? Can I work? Can I not work? How much will it cost me? Who needs to be informed? So yeah, it caused a little bit chaos, a little bit panic. So when the ETA system was introduced, we updated our existing mobility communication, including intranet guidance, immigration FAQs. We didn't launch a big communication campaign because at that moment we're like, it just causes more panic, because then more questions coming in because it's so new. So we focus more on a target communication, reaching employees most likely to be impacted, like business travelers, short-term assignees to the UK. This way we ensured compliance without overwhelming employees who are not affected. We have an assessment tool where we added some information into the result text. So when they do the assessment traveling to the UK, it will flag them to ETA so they know they need to apply for it. So we did our homework, and we just hope everyone is following it. We did actually had situations where we have our FAQ and the assessment tools, and then people come back like, oh, you told me it's only £10, I have to pay 75. I was like, okay, when you clicked on the wrong link with one of these agencies that Aaron just mentioned, please don't do this. But yeah, this is how it works, and we just need to manage, right? We need to manage employees, communication, HR that is in panic, that doesn't know how to inform people. So we give them something for themselves to allocate within the business partners.
No, that's fascinating. It's a great insight, is being able to portray the information in a simple manner, but not overwhelm, because I sense there's constant updates. So how do we kind of just give them enough information? That's really fascinating. And on that, Aaron, I've had kind of questions from people across the industry to learn more about kind of refusals in the appeal process. You did touch on the appeal process. Have you seen many refusals? And if you have, what would you say is the most kind of common occurrence around them?
Sure. So in terms of what we get fed back from project, there are refusals. There aren't so many. We get a lot more. So there's sort of a difference between rejection and refusal. Rejection tends to be if they're unable to verifying individuals. So they're having problems reading somebody's face when they take a picture, or they're unable to really access the document. That can lead to a rejection. Refusal wise, we tend to see refusals based on previous immigration history. So people sort of not declaring that they've had previous sort of adverse immigration history within the UK before, and that's being flagged on the system. But based on the data that I've seen, actually not many people are being refused in ETA, which is really good to see. And as we kind of project, I think a high percentage of people will get their ETA, but it tends to be primarily adverse immigration experience that results in refusals.
Okay, so the advice is be honest from
The the
the
advice is
very
be
start.
honest, and many people think, well, if I've been refused an ETA, I'm definitely going to be refused a visit visa. That's not necessarily the case because the ETA is a light touch product. It doesn't allow the person to put much information in or explain themselves. However, anybody who has seen a visit visa application knows that it provides more space and then some for people to provide their information. So again, that application goes straight to a caseworker, and that caseworker can consider everything about that person before making the decision. Whereas the ETA, because it's light touch, it doesn't allow for that broader explanation, almost goes, no, this person can't come in. Whereas a caseworker, given a chance, may go, actually, given all the information I've got, they can be granted a visa.
Yeah, no, that's helpful actually, and makes sense. And kind of zooming out a little bit into the wider immigration landscape. I know, Nina, you follow this closely from the UK, but also from a global perspective. We have, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we've seen a lot of change in terms of regulation, fee increases and salary thresholds. When you're heavily involved in kind of policy, from an immigration and global mobility perspective, what would you say from your perspective has had kind of the single biggest impact in terms of your policy and your strategy for this year?
For this year, obviously, it was ETA fee increases. I mean, we, like I just mentioned, we're publishing immigration FAQs say ETA is £10. Previously, we had £16, so we continuously have to update everything. There's never a dull moment with immigration. We have two big headquarters in Germany and the UK, so there's a lot of travel happening in between this country, not just business meeting, project-based. Immigration fee increases, changing on immigration routes. Brexit is still a topic for us, which cut off a lot of programs that we had for more the blue collar workers. So yeah, the biggest impact has been the need to be earlier and more strategic in planning, cost consideration. Can we afford hiring people in the UK? Would it make sense to hire them somewhere else? What about virtual assignments? Could they do the job while being in a different country? Yeah, this changes pushed us to be more agile, while in the past, business immigration, even in-house, was more like casework, looking on operation. These days, it's more strategic planning, foreseeing what could happen, like governments in place like Trump, they force you, right, to think ahead. So what could happen? What should we prepare for? How much can we panic our environment? Or should we just like wait and see? But then it could be too late. So yeah, it is like a balance.
Yeah, no, it's an ongoing challenge, and specifically around these, we've had lots of kind of pivots around the thresholds, the salary thresholds and the increases. Has that kind of affected the perspective of the organization when they're kind of looking at talent into this region? Would you say it's the fees have directly impacted you?
Yeah. It has. So we're looking more deliberately about which roles we sponsor.
Yeah.
Can we afford relocation packages in addition to the visa costs, comparing to like Germany, where the government fees like 160 euros for one person, in the UK is like 15,000 for like a 5-year visa. It is easy to say the one that's moving to Germany, yeah, of course we're paying for relocation, for housing. It's still cheaper than the pure immigration costs in the UK. So yeah, this consideration are happening. Like, what can we offer? Would it be unfair to offer the UK people, in addition to the visa cost, a relocation? Because in total, it would be more money spent on a UK employee than on one that's moving to Germany. So yeah, and then policy changes, right? Like I mentioned, do we do assignments? Are they locally hired? Also consideration. As I mentioned before, virtual assignments are a topic now for us. So all these things play a role when it's become so expensive to fill roles in specific countries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm hearing the same. Virtual and hybrid assignments seem to be coming up a lot, and I think that's being dictated by a lot of the associated fees and legislation in this region. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And Hamza, I know you get a great perspective because you look after kind of all of our clients that touch the UK. How do you think kind of these changes with the legislation, maybe and more rigorous checks as well around the compliance piece and the fee. How do you think our clients have been perceiving this or reacting to it?
I think it's a common theme that companies are being frustrated. There is a great sense of frustration amongst them. But it's not just companies as well, it's actually talents. Talents are very cautious. From a company's perspective, we're seeing that it's a budget issue as well at the same time.
Yeah.
And they have to ask themselves the main question that they're now asking is, do we really need you in the UK? Can you do this job from somewhere else? So it's similar to what Nina said. Can this assignment be done elsewhere? Can we hire someone else locally? And these questions are coming up. And from the last year or so that we've actually actively seen, there's a big restraint of hiring and relocating to the UK because of the cost. There is a high cost. UK has become one of the most expensive countries to relocate talents, and it's sad that we do see that. And again, we have European destinations that are a few €100 and you can relocate someone. So that's definitely been a big behavioral shift in hiring. Another thing we've also seen is that it's only senior or managerial positions that, after going through an internal rigorous process to relocate, are getting the approvals to relocate because, again, budgets. There's a lot of new entrants we see. First choice is not really the UK now, for employers and from talents.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going to ask you to touch on that. Yeah, I think the specific job roles who are getting the opportunity seems to be changing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's possibly because April last year, Home Office actually changed the SOC codes, the Standard Occupation Classification codes, which are used to sponsor. And there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of removals, a lot of new entrant roles. And when I mean new entrant, I'm talking about someone who's just kicking off their career, or they are they're changing their career and they're starting from ground level. Some of those roles are no longer there.
Yeah.
We've had some clients who were highly frustrated, and all of a sudden they had to let go of a lot of people and ask them that, look, hey, your job card's no longer eligible, and we can't now sponsor you. But how do we work around that? Unless you're promoting them to managerial position. I mean, imagine someone starting off their career and they come in a managerial position. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So that upskilling is still needed. But again, there is that frustration from a compliance perspective because at the end of the day, there is a risk of compliance being breached. And if that is breached, then come down the enforcers then come down on you. And that's something that every company, along with all these additional costs, if you then have to face enforcement, is it viable for a business model to then succeed?
Yeah, no, my favorite word, compliance. We'll come to that in a second. But yeah, great insights from what we're seeing. And Aaron, I think you touched on this in terms of the fees. I think some people were quite surprised. It was pretty speedy. Um, the fee increase that went from the 10 to the 16. I think maybe it came sooner than most of us were ready for. Do you have any insights around that?
So if I'm honest, it was sort of a surprise to me when we found out as well. It'd been something that had been discussed for quite some time. The reasons that we were kind of exposed to was that there's no sort of secret that the migration and border system requires additional funding. And I think from this government, the perspective is that those who are using it should pay for it. Again, we weren't expecting such a sort of rise. I think it was a 60% rise in terms of the ETA fee. But those decisions were happening at ministerial level, um, in terms of the rationale for the approach in terms of that and sort of the sponsorship fee. Again, it kind of just goes back to this idea of those who kind of benefit from it should pay for it. That was kind of the main line that our ministers use when kind of given the rationale for it. I wish I could give you a more in-depth insight, but the Home Secretary doesn't invite me around for dinner to talk these things through. So this is all I know for now.
That would be a fabulous conversation.
That would be an interesting conversation.
Let me know if you get
going.
Yeah, we're gonna have questions ready for you. If you ever get that would be fascinating. But yeah, I did hear that in Parliament. If you ever watch Parliament, it did come up about the benefit aspect. Yeah, and around the compliance piece, Nina, it's such a hot topic. It's everyone's kind of favorite word in the space. I was speaking to an in-house mobility person last week, and she said 2025 is going to be the year of compliance for us. It seems to be on everyone's agenda. So curious to hear more from your perspective. How are you approaching compliance from an immigration perspective at RWE? And do you feel this year it's kind of higher up the priority agenda?
Yeah, it feels it's like rising every year. Compliance has always been a cornerstone of our mobility program. It's always been important. Mobility is not just immigration, it's not tax, it's just security. Obviously, they were always more in focus, but I have the feeling now with all the changes worldwide, it's become even more central. At RWE, we have reinforced our internal controls, like through tools that we're using, expanded education, trainings, for employees, managers, just to make them understand, okay, what are implications? What do you need to do just to educate them? What are their rights and obligations? We also strengthen partnerships with external providers. We keep regular updates. We have policy calls with them, which are very important to us. Just to be prepared. We are planning mock audits, which we have never done before. I think we have done one in the past, but we understand it's more important now than ever, seeing that other companies have been audited lately. So we're like, we want to be prepared. We want to be compliant. I mean, the wish is there. So we're going for it. It's not just a HR topic anymore. It's now regularly part of like broader discussions within the organization. Yeah, compliance is a hot topic. And I don't think it will become less in 2026 or 2027. Like I mentioned before, immigration always was like filing applications, casework, but it becomes more and more strategic planning, compliance, and to ensure that everyone is like set up correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's really being elevated at the higher level. And yeah, interesting to hear about your mock audit. I'm hearing about this a lot as well, whereas people kind of thought it was an additional cost and not necessary. I'm hearing a lot more about those. And yeah, no doubt some great insights will come off it. Would love to hear more once that's done. And Hamza, from your perspective, in terms of what you're seeing from clients, what do you think kind of some of the misconceptions are around kind of how easy or difficult it is around sponsorship licenses? I mean, I've spoken to people who are authorizing officers and had forgotten that they were the authorizing officers. How do you think people kind of perceive this experience of being of having the sponsorship license?
Yeah. I think it piggybacks on what Aaron said in the beginning. Once something has been successful, they then start focusing on enforcement. So when Home Office starts focusing on enforcement, that means businesses and immigration advisors now need to get their guard up and make sure everything from a compliance perspective is up to date. With immigration, it's not seen as something that's highly important at the moment, from an employer's perspective. There is a greater importance on it, don't get me wrong. However, we do see that they do need guidance on how do we do this, because government in guidance and information is just a whole load of policy guidance. Now who's going to take out that time, go through it, understand it, simplify it, and then make it make sense? That's where from an immigration perspective, I mean, it's not just a legal checkbox anymore. It's now strategic. It impacts employer branding, it impacts your DEI goals. Long-term planning is also impacted and affected. those are all great things that happen within a business or within an organization, especially with our clients as well. We see all these things, but the misconception is that sometimes we forget that there is a compliance aspect of it. You must make sure you have your employee files up to date. As Nina mentioned, mock audits, that's a great way to prepare, because the last thing you want is, if they do turn up to your door, they might be friendly in the beginning, but then it will start getting worse and worse. And that's what we don't want. Um, right to work checks, I mean, they're digitalized, very simple. I mean, the government is making it easy. I'm not gonna say that, no, they're hardcore, it's really bad. No, there are some easements that are coming, but we need to make sure, as and what we see from our clients as well, is just ensure that you have the policies in place. You have those once a month or twice a week check-ins internally at management level, and understand, hey, are we doing this correctly? This new person that was hired, have we got an employee file? Is there a right to work check on there? When does that expire? When do we have to do a new one? What kind of visa are they on? Is there a restriction? Is there a limitation there? These kind of checks will keep you above in the game.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely key. As Nina mentions, it's beyond the filing of the good old days of filing of paperwork. There are so many more aspects to consider. And Nina, we're hearing a lot about kind of organizations having to get creative and maybe have innovative approaches, keeping on top of the compliance aspect, but also navigating fees and budgets, etc. Interestingly, you touched on things like virtual assignments, etc. Talk us through kind of any other innovative methods that you're either implementing or considering implementing.
Yeah, I mean, we focus on combining smarter processes with better technology. I think technology is very important to us nowadays. For example, we have centralized case management systems for more consistency and visibility. We improved immigration reporting tools, cost calculation tools. We are prioritizing upskilling managers. We provide them with simple guidance to understand, like I said, right, obligation, immigration topics. We provide them with updates, change what's changing around the world. Finally, like you mentioned, we explore alternatives where appropriate. Like, can we send someone for a short-term project somewhere while avoiding the immigration complexity? Is it possible to have someone locally there? Is it possible to do it virtually? Like, virtual assignment are a big topic for us now. Because a lot of things nowadays, as long as they're not on a construction site, can be done from home or in the location you're based. And this comes way more into focus than it used to be. Back, we're a traditional German company, so assignments was a big thing. They got everything, private schools, added allowances, cars, but with rising costs and complexity and immigration, the considerers are, do we really need this very expensive assignments? Can we localize them? Can they do the work out of Germany and get compensated differently? This plays a big role at the moment, and is a repeating topic at the moment as well.
Yeah, the good old days of long-term assignments with your housing and your school and all those
I would have
wonderful
loved that.
Yeah. Those are days are long gone, and we are all having to be really creative around, as you say, making sure we've got hiring strategies, we have a pipeline of talent, but being mindful of all the cost initiatives, budgets, and also the never-ending changes that we're having to navigate at every border. It's certainly tough. And Aaron, you touched on, obviously we understand digitization is, one of the goals around ETA, and as you mentioned, a lot of other countries are doing it. Are there any kind of future strategies around the wider digitization in terms of border control and the whole Home Office?
Sure. So in terms of the program that I work in, the Future Border and Immigration Systems one, the main two things were sort of the ETA and the rollout of e-visas, bringing us into that more digital space. There is a program that sits sort of next to or behind it, which is called Border Vision, which is looking at sort of the passenger process through the border, how that can be made better. So at the moment, sort of those milestones are sort of kicking in, but things that are being considered are that potentially like contactless travel and things like that. So those are things that are being considered at the moment that sit behind this. We're sort of waiting from a steer from this new government about how they want to approach that, the things that they want to do, because some of this was left over from the previous government. So I think they're just sort of figuring out what the next steps are in terms of the immigration processes, but also the sort of passenger journey through the border as well.
No, that's interesting, and good to know it's on the agenda. And you touched on it very briefly as well, the ETS, if that's the correct way to say it. We think it's coming in 2026. It's changed many times. Who knows? But people that talk about wider compliance from an Europe EU
Mm.
perspective think that there's some big master plan of joined up thinking. Do you see that happening in the distant future?
So in terms of what we know so far, um, we get asked this question quite a bit, especially by dual nationals who are thinking, if I'm per se British and Danish, what does that look like? How will the carriers react and all the rest of it? I know that there are ongoing talks, but as far as I'm aware, there is no sort of master plan at the moment. Who knows about a joined up approach if there's a reciprocal arrangement where we recognize theirs, they recognize ours, sort of thing. I think once we know the date for the ETIAS, as well as the entry exit system as well, that's something that the EU are also bringing in. I think once that matures more and we see what they plan to do, there potentially may be discussions about how the two systems may work. But I think it's very clear that they kind of want to draw a line that the UK is ETA, ETIAS is EU, and yes, American traveler, you are going to have to comply with both. And these two will have separate rules and regulations and things like that as well. So all I can say at the moment is watch this space. But I can't promise anything at the moment, no.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Yeah, I think it's watch the space forever. It's kind of it's never ending the unfolding of it all. And before we're going to run out of time, as always, and I'm seeing lots of questions in the Q&A as well. But I want to come to you, Nina, in terms of kind of final thoughts or quick tips or bit of advice for our audience, in terms of kind of the compliance piece, but staying on top of regulations. What would be your kind of one quick tip?
Well, I think companies need to treat immigration as a strategic, proactive function, not just an operational step. This means involving immigration at the earliest stage of workforce planning, before roles are posted, before offers are being made, before projects are being launched. I believe that those who act early, stay flexible, and bring in expert advice will be best positioned to navigate the fast-changing landscape and the agility. So I think, yeah, bring immigration in as early as possible and give them a seat at a table and not forget us. And then at some point, oh, there's still immigration we need to consider, and then everything is hold up because immigration takes a while.
No, I love that. I love that proactive and strategic is, I mean, that's you're a great advert for that on the immigration space. So we need to take you further. But yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And Hamza, your advice to kind of some of our clients around staying on top of this?
Yeah, I'll come in with build flexibility within your policies, get ahead of forecasting, and stay close to updates, because at the end of the day, agility is key. Every company that's agile at the moment will see the hard work that they do now in future when things are rapidly changing, when enforcement is happening, when compliance checks are more frequent, they'll already be ready for it. And it's just getting through the first hurdle. So be agile and flexible.
Yeah, no, good words, agile and flexible. That's great. And Aaron, from an ETA, ETA, e-visa perspective, a quick tip about kind of keeping on top of
Hmm.
the constant regulation
Yeah,
changes.
I can only piggyback on what Nina and Hamza have said. I would just say whatever sort of home office process or immigration engage in the process, we may overdo it with the comms and everything like that. But one thing I've definitely learned is engage in it now because you'll panic later. And that's what we're seeing a lot of now is people panicking and being quite scared. So even if you think it's not for you or you think 18 months is a long time away, it's not. These things come around really quickly. So my definite advice is just engage in the process.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And Nina, you mentioned you've already had employees being checked at borders in the UK.
Yeah. German national, was pulled out after he went to the e-gates and was asked and questioned, what is he doing here? Why? It wasn't an ETA thing because he very was a model traveler. He applied for his ETA. He went through his travel assessment. So he was able to answer his questions. But you never know, right? If you are not prepared, if you don't have the documents in place, then it's a whole different experience for the employee. Might be panicking, and obviously he's actually part of my team. He was well prepared. He knew what to say. He knew what questions might they approach him with. So it was an easy experience for him, but it could be completely different. And you would have a panicked employee standing there calling. He's like, I'm at the border. What should I do? So yeah, I think planning, education, being prepared is a key when you send your employees traveling.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect, very practical live example of what can happen. And brilliant that it happened to one of your team members because they probably knew all the right things to say to border
Yeah.
control as well. Don't ever say work is generally so that's really, really amusing. Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions. Nina, this one's for you. How do we justify visa investments to leadership when the budget is tight?
Well, for me, it's very easy. It's like it's a business decision. If you really, really want to have them, you have to invest. And it's not always cheaper to start recruiting processes locally to find the right people because, to be quite frank, recruiters normally try to hire locally, and only when they don't find them locally, they go outside. Because even for recruiters, it's more difficult to hire someone that needs to go through an immigration process than hire someone that goes locally because they can't be bothered with immigration, but when they have a candidate that needs to go to immigration, they have the burden of immigration. So their priority is always locally. And if they already found someone, if they couldn't find someone and then it goes international, then they have to make the investment or it will take a very, very long time to fill that role. And I think there's a conversation I would have with the management team. It's like, look, this is how it is. We couldn't find locally. You have a great candidate there. You either make the investment now or you're losing out because you can't fill the role. The role is empty. You can't grow in business. So this is also a loss.
Absolutely. And the talent shortage is real. It's certainly happening across Europe. So yeah, it's a great argument to have. This one could be for you, Aaron. Any resources you'd recommend for staying up to date with UK immigration law?
There is swaths of guidance all over the place. I wish I could say there's like one circular place that you can go to. The one thing I would advise, one thing we have on our ETA page is you can sign up for updates. So when that particular page gets updated with new policy, you'll get an email update. And I think it's a function that is available across gov.uk. So for a lot of times and a lot of stuff that I do, if I'm interested in visitor rules, for instance, I'll type that into gov.uk and there's usually a bit where you can get an email update. So sign yourself up for that and you'll get the email updates as and when that policy changes and that page is updated.
Yeah, and Aaron's very kindly shared some resources with us as well. So I'll see if my team and colleagues can drop those links anywhere. But we do have links to the Home Office website, which is a great resource. And a quick one for you, Hamza. Someone's asking, probably because of the fees, are there any other alternatives to skilled worker visas?
Yes, there are other visas, but it really depends on what the end game is. Companies have the option if they have head offices based in other countries, they can apply for the global business mobility routes. If there is someone on a senior level who has a great background in tech or in any industry, you could seek endorsements and apply via the global talent routes. However, every case is obviously assessed on a case-by-case basis. These are the main routes at the moment. For skilled workers, if you are looking to hire recently graduated ones, the Home Office is also flexible there with the new entrants. So someone that's switching from a student visa directly into a skilled worker visa, companies might save a cost and be exempt from immigration skills charge. If someone's on a graduate visa and they also meet the requirements for the new entrant, they can also, for the first initial 2 years, you could apply for the lower salary threshold, However, if you are looking to achieve indefinite leave to remain for the talent, they will need to meet the full 5-year requirement and other rules as well. But that's all that's available at the moment. I don't know if Aaron has any insights on whether there are going to be new processes that are going to be coming out soon, something that's more friendly, but
We
nothing.
might have to pause it there because we've run out of time already. So hold that thought and send the questions in if you've got any more. We've got resources of where we can ask more questions. Just some quick, exciting updates. We're in the middle of a webinar series where we're covering kind of different topics, areas of interests, national elections, all sorts of fun things that are affecting the immigration landscape. Our next webinar is on the 10th of June, and we're looking at all things AI, technology, and how it's affecting the immigration and global mobility landscape. So we'd love to have you join us for that. And also keep abreast of our LinkedIn page. We post updates there. There's lots of content. Hamza likes to post stuff on there too. But we also do legislation updates as well. So follow us on LinkedIn. All it leaves for me to say is thank you, thank you. I've loved this conversation, this discussion. I feel like we might need a round two. So stay tuned if we can extend this. But huge thanks to Nina, Hamza, and Aaron. Really appreciate it. And to everyone that's listened and joined from wherever you are virtually, it's been great to have you, and thank you for your time. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.